When we hear the story of a survivor of a tragic event, it feels more real than the history itself. The emotion, the pain, and the tragedy from the events of 9/11 is no exception. One woman survived this tragic day in American history, but lost the love of her life, and the entire story from her life at that moment was ultimately changed. She built a life around advocating and speaking for survivors, but all of her story turned out to be a lie. Welcome back to the Corner of Curiosity. I'm your host, Jazz. On this channel, I talk about everything from conspiracy theories, true crimes, to scammers and weirdos in American history, like the lady we're going to talk about in today's video. I heard about this woman years and years ago when I was really into conspiracies and true crime, and I definitely wanted to make a video about it, so that's what we're doing today. With that being said, let's just get into it. History is usually told through numbers. 2,977 victims, 19 terrorists, 4 planes. But if you actually talk to people who survived the tragic event of September 11th, that's not actually what they remember. It's not the numbers. It's a smell, a sound, a moment that just keeps on playing. If you talk to anybody that was alive during that moment in time and you ask them, where were you on 9/11? They can usually give you a breakdown of every single thing that happened that day because the event was so tragic. And by 2004, New York was still trying to recover. The cameras had moved on, the headlines slowed down, but for a lot of survivors, nothing really got better because they didn't lose their lives, but they lost their sense of safety. Their loved ones, the people around them that were always there, were gone. And a lot of them felt forgotten. So when this woman shows up, Tania Head, she felt exactly like what these people needed. She was composed, articulate, and she carried herself like someone who had seen something unimaginable and made it back. She didn't just join the survivor community, she became the face of it, their voice, their leader, and for some people, their source of comfort.
So it's going to be recognizing all the members of the 9/11 community, the victims and their families, the rescuers and recovery workers. The walk has been organized by the World Trade Center Survivors Network. It's an amazing organization in that there's no real hierarchy to it. Everybody just gets together and does the work. And I do want to recognize the coordinators of this, Tania Head.
But like I said at the beginning, there was just one problem. Her story was a little too perfect. And usually when things are too perfect, they usually are. And this woman, she was about to become the center of one of the most disturbing lies connected to 9/11. Not for money or for fame, she stole a tragedy.
Tania began to tell me that people in the network were saying that they had had some concerns with things that I was doing. There were people who had told her that I was not representing survivors aggressively enough. Then the board of the network basically called me in and told me what their concerns were. A primary person in that whole conversation was Tania.
To understand why she did this, we kind of have to go back to the story that she told everyone. To start off, she said that she worked for Merrill Lynch, and on the morning of September 11th, she claimed that she was on the 78th floor of the South Tower. And that really matters, because at 9:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175 crash hit the building, right around the floors that she mentioned, floor 78. So if her story was true, she was at the point of impact. She described a wall of fire, that the ceilings were collapsing, the air turned thick and almost impossible to breathe. And then she said she was crawling on her hands and knees, through debris, through smoke, through chaos, burning up. At one point, she said a man stopped her, a stranger, and she said that he handed her his wife's wedding ring and asked her to give it to his wife if he doesn't make it out. And then, out of the smoke, a man appears, wearing a red bandana. This was a real person. This was Wells Crawford, a real person, a real hero who saved multiple people's lives on the day of 9/11, and I definitely want to do a video about him as well. But this man was a true survivor and he was a true hero on this day because he saved so many people instead of saving himself.
Today we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
Tania told in her story that this man guided her to a stairwell, pushed her towards safety, and went back up, but he didn't survive. And according to her, that's how she made it out on that day. She said she woke up days later in a hospital bed, all alone. And when she asked for her husband, she was told that he'd been in the North Tower, that he didn't make it. So in one story, she was connected to a hero, a dying man's last wish, and the loss of her husband. It was everything. And then that's exactly why people believed her, because who would lie about such a thing like being a survivor of 9/11? And now this is where it gets kind of weird, because she builds her whole life and kind of career around being a survivor of 9/11. In 2004, she joins a survivor network, and almost immediately, everyone loved her. She rose to the top of this organization. She organized events, advocated for survivors, and became their voice. And she doesn't even take a salary. She actually put her own money into this organization because she believed in it so much, even though her involvement was a lie. So from the outside, she looked selfish. She looked like a woman who was just fighting for what was right and being an advocate for these survivors. But inside of the group, people started to feel a little bit off. She was very, very private about her past. She didn't really mention anything about herself as a whole, just about those moments from that particular day on 9/11.
I didn't. So why? Why am I special? Why was I spared? Why didn't they make it? Why did I make it? Was it God? Was it faith? Is it because we have something to do? Was it because we were shielded by the elevator machinery? It just makes you go crazy. You go crazy asking yourself why?
And sometimes if the attention started to shift away from her, she would get sick or feel overwhelmed. And suddenly, all the attention from everyone in the group would be back on her. It was nothing too obvious, but it felt a little bit off for people to notice. Now we have to get into how she was ultimately found out that her story was a full-on lie. By 2007, a reporter of the New York Times started to look into her story. At first, it was routine. They checked her contacts. They checked to make sure that she was an employee at Merrill Lynch, because that's where she said she worked at the time. And when they checked, there was no record of her employment. But that could be just a fluke. Maybe they just didn't have her on record because, the building got destroyed during that time. But then they actually found out something else. They didn't even have offices in that tower. So her saying that she worked at Merrill Lynch was a big fat lie, because how can you work at a building that wasn't even there on the day? And so now people are thinking, what is going on? Then they started to check her education history, because she also told many people that she was a graduate from Harvard and Stanford University. Once they checked, Harvard University and Stanford University had no record of her attending those schools. And at this point, it started to become a pattern of her lies started to unfold. It wasn't a mistake. Then, New York Times reached out to her for an interview, and suddenly, she's not able to be reached. She disappears, cancels interviews, and claims she's just too traumatized from this event and that she feels like she's being re-victimized from the events that happened on 9/11. But then, the final piece comes in. She claimed that her husband died that day in the North Tower, and so the reporters, rightfully so, contact the family to get a statement. And they say they have never heard of this woman in their life. That wasn't her husband. He wasn't anything to her. She took his name from a list of dead people from 9/11. And when the story breaks, it goes crazy, because this woman wasn't even from the United States of America. She was from Spain. A newspaper in Spain recognized her. Her real name, Alicia Esteva Head. And on September 11th, she wasn't even in New York City. She was in a classroom in Barcelona, watching the whole event happen on TV. So everything in her story was a lie. She wasn't even in New York that day. Just like everyone else, she lived the same day, but not in the way she claimed. After she was exposed, she disappears, with no apology, no explanation, and at one point, there's even a message saying that she died. But that was just another lie. It wasn't true. And the question is, why? She didn't take any money. She didn't take any valuables or anything from people. She took something else. The story from real survivors. A place in tragedy, historic tragedy, that wasn't even her story to tell. And that is really what makes this story so unsettling, because how can you sit there and lie about being a survivor of one of the most tragic events in American history and just make this story your own, using people that you've never met in your life and making them seem like you were part of it? But yes, that is my story today on Tania Head, or Elise, and I really wanted to cover this story because I've always been intrigued about this case and why this woman decided to lie about being a survivor when all of these claims and accusations were easily shown to be a lie. And if you have any other cases about people doing something like this, I am really interested to learn more about them and to possibly make a video on them. Let me know if you have ever heard of this woman and what do you think of her story in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!